Laundering. Honored keynote speaker, Mr. Jean-François, President of the Siracusa International Institute for Criminal Justice and Human Rights. Sri Kiran Mohan Das Menon, Senior Officer, Nuremberg Academy. Honorable judges, my esteemed colleagues, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is with immense pleasure, great pride, and a deep sense of purpose that I welcome you all to the inaugural session of the International Global Justice Dialogues. This groundbreaking initiative marks a significant step in connecting the Kerala judiciary with internationally renowned judges and policymakers to engage in meaningful discussion on contemporary legal issues, both domestic and international. The Kerala Judicial Academy has always been committed to the continuous development of judicial education, focusing on enhancing capacity of our judicial officers to meet the challenges of an evolving legal landscape. The Kerala Global Justice Dialogues represent yet another milestone in that journey. This series is designed to foster knowledge exchange, international best practices, and explore their relevance to judicial practices here in Kerala. Today, as we commence this remarkable dialogue series, we have the distinct privilege of hosting a keynote address by Mr. Jean-François Thony, a global authority on criminal justice reform and fight against organized crime. His leadership at Siracusa International Institute has been instrumental in shaping international perspective on complex nexus between anti-money laundering measures and organized crime. Allow me a moment to share a few words about Siracusa Institute. The Siracusa International Institute is a storied institution that has played unique and integral role in the development of international and transnational criminal law. Established in 1972 by the International Association of Penal Law, the institute was formally recognized by a decree of President of Republic of Italy in May 1980. From 1972 to 2015, it was led by eminent professor Sharif Bassioni, widely regarded as the father of international criminal law, a title bestowed upon him by the International Bar Association. Professor Bassioni's legacy includes serving in 22 leading United Nations positions and chairing international commissions of inquiry on Libya, Afghanistan, and former Yugoslavia. His contributions were also instrumental in establishing a permanent international criminal court in 1998. In 1992, the Institute signed a special cooperation agreement with United Nations Office in Vienna, becoming one of the 19 organizations comprising United Nations Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice Program Network. In recent years, the Institute has focused on fostering international judicial cooperation and addressing emerging threats to global security, particularly transnational organized crime and illicit finance. Ladies and gentlemen, we are extremely delighted and honored to have Mr. Thony, the inaugural speaker of this series. Mr. Jean-François Thony is globally acclaimed legal expert and the incumbent president of the Siracusa International Institute. His distinguished career includes serving as the director of the National School of Judges in France and as a judge and prosecutor in some of the most prominent courts in his country, a global leader in combating organized crime and money laundering. Mr. Thony has worked extensively with the United Nations and International Monetary Fund to develop and implement robust legal frameworks worldwide. His expertise and insight will undoubtedly set a high benchmark for the dialogue that will follow. The topics of today's dialogue, anti-money laundering and organized crime, could not be more timely or relevant. In today's increasingly interconnected world, the ramifications of organized crime extend far beyond national borders, undermining governance, economic stability, and social order. Money laundering, in particular, serves a lifeblood for organized crime, enabling illicit enterprises to flourish while eroding the public trust in institutions. For us in India, and especially here in Kerala, these global phenomena are not distinct realities. They resonate with our jurisdiction and communities. The judicial officers, law enforcement agencies, and legal professionals We stand on the front line of confronting these challenges. However, combating such deeply entrenched threats require more than reactive measures. It needs strategic, collaborative approach informed by international best practices and guided by an unwavering commitment to justice and accountability. In this context, today's dialogue promises to be an enriching and thought-provoking experience. Mr. Thony's vast experience will offer crucial insights into how nations and judicial systems across the world are addressing the dual threats of money laundering and organized crime. His perspective will help us reimagine our strategies, ensuring that our legal framework are both robust and adaptive to evolving the nature of these challenges. The Kerala Global Justice Dialogues are envisioned as a platform to facilitate exactly such exchanges, an avenue for thought leaders, policymakers, academicians, and practitioners to come together and engaging in meaningful dialogues on issues that shape our global legal landscape. As we embark on this journey, let us remind ourselves of our shared responsibility. In combating organized crime and money laundering, our efforts must be relentless and our vision must transcend borders. It is through partnerships and platforms like these that we can truly uphold the rule of law, safeguard the integrity of our systems, and contribute to more just and equitable global order. On behalf of Kerala Judicial Academy, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Jean-François Thony for gracing this occasion and for sharing his invaluable insight with us. I also thank each one of you for your presence, your participation, and your enduring commitment to justice. Let us work together not only to address these pressing challenges, but to envision and build a future where justice prevails, governance stands resilient, and the rule of law triumphs over all adversities. Thank you. And I look forward to an engaging and insightful session. And with these words, I also invite Mr. Kiran Mohandas Menon for his opening remarks for this dialogue series.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to the director, the deputy director, and the additional director of the Kerala Judicial Academy, esteemed keynote speaker of the day, Mr. Jean-François Thony, and all other distinguished guests and judges who have joined us online. So as the director stated, my name is Kiran Mohandas Menon. I am a senior officer and the head of the Public Discourse Department at the International Nuremberg Principles Academy. The Academy is a foundation that was established by the Federal Republic of Germany in 2014. It is housed at the Nuremberg Palace of Justice, which some of you might know is the historic venue where the Nuremberg trials were conducted after the Second World War against the surviving Nazi leadership. And in this context, our work seeks to preserve the heritage of these pioneering trials. And we do this by supporting the actors and institutions most crucial to developing international law and upholding international law standards. Our specialized capacity building initiatives engage with judicial bodies from across the world, and we have worked with judicial bodies from all continents in this context. Now, I think when we reflect on international law, when we trace its history, trace its functioning, there's sometimes a misconception that this law is primarily limited to the international sphere. However, in today's globally interconnected world where threats tend to be transnational, I think this couldn't be further from the truth. There is nothing distant, disconnected, or abstract about how international law engages with domestic jurisdictions today. Likewise, innovations and strategies that originated in national systems remain at the heart of international law's development and operational parameters. There's a quote I like to state often from Doug Hammarskjöld, who was an esteemed former Secretary General of the United Nations, who said that people should stop thinking of the United Nations as an abstract drawing and rather see it as an institution they've built themselves. And I think in this context, it's fair to say that international law, its contours, its borders, have definitely been drawn by domestic systems, especially from the global south. And in India's case, this interaction has a very rich heritage. India has played a very important role in the creation of landmark instruments such as the Genocide Convention. And in return, our constitution was inspired by international law standards such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And our courts have a strong tradition of evoking international law in judgments for context and for authority. So in this regard, this custom that the Kerala Global Justice Dialogue seeks to advance and to embrace, and in this regard, I think this and future editions will examine the substance, the procedure, and experiences of international legal systems, while we examine their resonance for our institutions as we confront the most pressing challenges facing the delivery of justice in the state today. So I will conclude by thanking Mr. Jean-François Thony again. It is a privilege that such an esteemed international figure is inaugurating these dialogues, and also asking those in the members of the audience to please already start thinking of questions you might want to put in the chat box, which we can then put forward to our speaker at the end of the session during what I'm sure will be an interactive session. Thank you very much, Jean-François. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. Thank you. I'm delighted today to be with you all, and I'm also privileged and humbled to have been chosen to be the first speaker for this newly established Global Justice Dialogues. I would like to warmly thank the director of the Kerala Judicial Academy, as well as my friend Kiran Menon, to have organized this exchange, which I'm sure will be very interesting, maybe for you, but certainly for me, because I don't have so many opportunities to be in touch with colleagues from South Asia and from India, and that for me will be certainly a great experience. I want to introduce myself. You did it very well, Mr. Director. In addition to be the president of the Siracusa Institute, I worked in a number of international organizations, but also as a judge and as a prosecutor in France during my career. And it's the mix of all this that I want to convey to you today. In fact, particularly because I've been lucky to join the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime at a very particular moment. It was at the beginning of the 90s, at the moment where these issues of the fight against money laundering, the fight against organized crime, became crucial for a number of reasons, and I will come back to this later. Today, I don't want to talk too much about the legal nitty-gritty of the concept, but to give you an opportunity to step back a little bit and to look at these concepts of organized crime and money laundering. Everyone talks about it, you know about it, but sometimes it's important to once again take the time to think about the concept, because there are sometimes some misunderstanding or some misrepresentation about what we are talking about. So what I will try to do, is, depending on the time available, and feel free to interrupt me at some point if you think that I'm talking too much, which could very much be the case, to talk about the concept of organized crime, the concept of money laundering, the links between both, and also to give you a little bit about the European experience in this matter, because Europe has made an incredible lot of progress in the area of the fight against organized crime, thanks to a number of very powerful cooperation instruments, and I will come back to it. And maybe if we have time to talk about what should be the prosecution and the adjudication strategies that we should all have to have a better grip on organized crimes and money laundering issues. So let me begin with the concept of organized crime. Organized crime is as old as crime is. and crime is as old as humanity is. As soon as you have had humanity, you have had crime, and since it is always easier to commit a crime when you are two or more, because you can help each other and you can plan in advance for better success, better chance to commit your crime. Organized crime has very quickly been a fact. And if you go back to the antique times, to the ancient times, you have all heard about the hordes of bandits, about piracy on the scenes with the Vikings and etc. This was already organized crime. This was organization put together with a chief. Very important, the presence of a chief in the concept of organized crime, which are committing crime to get profit. Remember the term profit because it is in the middle of everything. Later, I could talk about for years about the history of organized crime. I just want to stop on the Chinese triads during the first half of the 17th century, which are still existing today, and which are a very interesting type of criminal organization, because as Yakuza in Japan are, Chinese triads are very much embedded into the society in their own countries, and this is a very important factor. Also, I will come back to that in a moment. We could talk about during also the 17th and 18th century of the pirates, the privateers and the freebooters on all the seas around the globe, which purpose was only to make criminal profit by pillaging boats on the sea. Later, you have the mafias, which developed in particular in Europe, in Italy, although there is not only one mafia type, but when you talk about mafia, of course, you talk about Italy, mafia which are still present, but with some evolutions, I would say, in particular in the power of some of the mafias as compared to others. Of course, the 20th century was marked by drug trafficking and the development of the drug cartels, in particular in Latin America, which have become so powerful that there was no other option than building up an international apparatus and a mechanism to fight against these drug cartels. And it is precisely at that moment that the concept of organized crime was given a legal definition, and that international conventions to address them were put in place. This is also something on which I will come back for further detail a little bit other. Today, we still have these criminal organizations, we still have the drug cartels, but we have also another very preoccupying evolution, which is cybercrime and cyber criminal organization, taking advantage of the vulnerabilities of the internet and the virtual world, I would say. And this is really the new trend today that the international community is facing. What is the link between the old bandits in the ancient times and the mafias and the cyber criminal organization? What is the common element between all these all this way of committing crimes, about all this organization. There is one thing, it is profit. It goes without saying, but it's always important to repeat and repeat that there is no criminal organization without the quest for illegal profit. A criminal organization is necessarily built up for the purpose of committing profit. There could be one exception, and I don't see more than that, which is the case of terrorist organizations, which ultimate goal is to create chaos among population, not necessarily to commit profit, but they need to get profits to reach this goal. And we will see that sometimes the frontier between criminal organizations and terrorist organization is very much blurred. So profit. The notion of profit is core to the notion of organized crime. There is a second element, which is opportunism. Those organizations, those criminal organizations, whatever they are very flexible and agile. Whenever there is a new criminal opportunity, they will immediately jump on it. So they are able to go from one kind of criminal activity to another one, depending on whether the activity is more profitable and less risky. This is what makes a criminal organization make their arbitrage, the notion of risk and the notion of profit. And they put a cursor on activities where there is less risk and more profit. And one example is very striking. I like to refer to this example of agility of a criminal organization, is the example of the carbon tax fraud in Europe at the beginning of the years 2000. This is typical. You know that in Europe, Europe instituted a market of carbon. The idea being that those companies which were producing less carbon than others would get some bonuses, could get some certificate that they could sell to companies which were producing more carbon than they should. So it was decided to establish a market, like a stock market, on which you could buy and sell your rights to produce carbon. It was a interesting idea. It was a completely virtual concept, and it was an innocent concept, because when this stock market of carbon was put in place, it took less than 6 months to criminal organization to take advantage of what they could on this carbon tax market. They basically, to make a long story short, they realized that in some European countries, the VAT was applicable on export, whereas in others, it was not the case. So they were buying in some countries some carbon rights, I would say, free of tax, and they were selling it, including VAT, to other countries. VAT that they would, of course, never give back to the country. So each time they were making a transaction, they were having a margin of 20%, which is the amount of VAT. 20% doesn't mean a lot. But when you are talking of a market where you can buy anything, because it's purely virtual and it can be done in seconds between the moment you sell and the moment you buy and the moment you sell, they could make some transaction on billions of euros and make huge profits on it. And once again, I say that because the first example of carbon tax fraud appeared 6 months after this system was put in place. This is to show how agile this organization are, and this is to show that they found an activity, a criminal activity, where the risks were extremely low and the profits were extremely right. Once again, this arbitrage that they always do. Profit, opportunism, violence, of course. There is no criminal organization without violence, and I will not get into the details, you know, as well as I do what we mean by that. And also corruption. There also, the notion of corruption is interesting, is core to a criminal organization. There is no a criminal organization without corruption, and there is no corruption without, at some point, a criminal organization. And when a criminal organization becomes extremely powerful, their corruption power becomes also extremely high. And this is where it becomes extremely disruptive and destabilizing, even for big countries. It's when, with the corruption that is involved, allow the criminal organizations to once again even become, how could I say, in control of a state. If you look at the history of Colombia in the 90s, Colombia was in control in the hands of the drug cartels. I remember at that time, when I was traveling in Africa, in a small country of West Africa, I realized that through a very complex money laundering mechanism, some drug cartels were corrupting the opposition party, or was financing the opposition party in order to bias and to manipulate the election process, and so that the opposition party could be in power, and behind, of course, the drug cartel was in power of the country, with not for the only sake of becoming the real power in place in the country, but because they had decided to establish a base in Africa in order to ship by plane or by boat cocaine from Colombia to these Western African countries, and then to Europe. So it was a kind of transit area, and they were able to buy a country with the economic power generated by that. This is striking, and this is also extremely worrying. It is scary, and this, unfortunately, still exists. Profit, opportunism, violence, and corruption. You have here all the ingredients to have a good recipe for criminal organizations. There are three types of criminal organizations. You have what I call the integrated type of criminal organization, like the mafias in Italy, like the Yakuzas in Japan, or like the triads in China. These organizations, as I mentioned a moment ago, are completely embedded in the social framework. They are part of the society, and sometimes they serve the society. They serve the society, but providing jobs to some people, but providing subsidies for poor families, and etc., etc. And those type of organizations are so embedded that they are probably the most difficult to extricate, because there is some popular acceptance and even or approval of it, because it also served them when they need it. The second type is what I call the vulture organizations. These criminal organizations develop on the decay of failed states. This is what we saw, for example, in Colombia in the 20th century. This is what we saw in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union at the end of at the fall of the Iron Wall at the beginning of the 90s. All countries, or most of them, were completely corrupt. With the explosion of the Soviet administration, there was no government or very weak government, and the development of these criminal organizations, the Vorizakovne in Russia or in Georgia, all the other mafia in Eastern Europe, were typical vulture organizations, which immediately realized the benefit that they could take through corruption, again, because they could not develop without corruption, to basically buy entire parts of the economies of these countries. And it's not a coincidence that a number of criminal organizations became the owners of big gas company, of big power companies, and etc., etc. And the last one is what I call the guerrilla mafias. I mentioned a moment ago the link between terrorism and criminal organizations. Terrorism is in a sociological side of the term rather than in the legal time of this. In a number of countries, when you have guerrillas, when you have civil unrest, you have guerrilla organizations which develop, and for the sake of financing their guerrilla, financing their resistance or rebellion to the state, they get into criminal activities, producing profit for the purpose of their own wars, of their own objectives. What is interesting here is that at some point you end up not knowing what is the guerrilla organization and what is the criminal organization. You don't know anymore if crime is a mode of financing for the guerrilla organization, or if guerrilla is the way to assert and settle the criminal power of the organization. We have seen this everywhere in the world. We have seen it in Latin America, Colombia, at the time of the FARC, in Sri Lanka. I could give you hundreds of examples of these links between guerrilla movements and criminal organization. This is what I wanted to say to give you a better idea of, hopefully, of what organized crime is. What is very interesting is that whereas organized crime is a very old concept, the conceptualization of the notion of organized crime is very recent. As I told you, we began to discuss about it during the 1990s. So a couple of decades ago, it existed since the beginning of humanity. Yes, in some legislation, you had some offenses, some crimes like conspiracy that could cover that kind of behavior, but basically there was not a single legislation of a single country which was encompassing in a criminal offense the criminal organization, the organized crime activity itself. Why was it so? As I told you, because some of these criminal organizations during the 90s became so powerful that they could completely destabilize the country. In Italy, the mafia was financing some parties, government parties, but also opposition parties. In Colombia, the cartels were not only threatening Colombia and taking control over Colombia, they were also threatening the United States, which was the first market of that. And there was a lot of unrest in the US because of the development of drug trafficking there. So there was a realization by the international community that there was a need to address the issue of organized crime per se, in addition to addressing the criminal activities like drug trafficking in arms, and etc. It was not enough anymore to address, legally speaking, and in terms of international convention, the criminal activities. You had to address the criminal organization itself. The first international conference which came up with this concept, with the Naples a Global Declaration of Plan of Action in 1994. You see how recent this is. What did Naples Global Declaration said about organized crime? And you will, from this definition that they give, you will see that it covers what we have talked about until now. This is what Naples Global Declaration said. Although there is no legal or exhaustive definition of the phenomenon, the following elements also characterize organized crime: the organization or groups with criminal purpose, this is obvious; hierarchical links or personal interrelation allowing someone to manage the group. There has to be a leader, there has to be a chief; recourse to violence, intimidations, or corruption to gain illicit profits or territories or markets; laundering of proceeds; potential expansion in a new activity and cross-border; cooperation with other organized crime groups. These are the 6 elements which characterize a criminal organization. Interesting in this, because I will come back.
Mr. Thony, I can't hear you anymore. I apologize for interrupting you, but we've lost the audio. Still no.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's fine. Thank you.
I don't know why my microphone got muted by itself. I didn't do anything. I hope you didn't lose too much of it.
Maybe the last 30 seconds, if you could please repeat it.
Okay. Yes. Did you hear what I said about the Naples Global Declaration of Plan of Action?
You were starting with it. Yes, you were explaining.
Okay. So yes, this the global declaration defined what was the constitutive element of a criminal organization: the existence of a group with a criminal purpose, the existence of hierarchical links within the group, so that someone becomes the manager, the leader, the boss of the group, the recourse to violence, intimidation, or corruption to gain illicit profits, or territories or markets, the laundering of proceeds, the potential of expansion in any new activity and cross-border, and cooperation with other criminal groups. This is the 6 elements which characterize criminal organizations according to the Naples Declaration. Interestingly, among these 6 elements, you have the laundering of proceeds, because once again, there is no criminal organization without the laundering of proceeds, because a powerful criminal organization generates so many profit that they cannot use it, especially today, without processing it to have the appearance of being legal income. And this will be the second part of this conference this morning. The Naples 1994 gave the launching start, I would say, to the creation of an international convention against transnational organized crime. This convention was discussed and finally signed in 2000. It is called the Palermo Convention. The official term is the United Nations Convention on Transnational Organized Crime, but it's called by the name of the city where it was signed, Palermo in Sicily, the place where the Italian mafia is, and it was not a coincidence. Palermo gave first a legal definition of a criminal organization, and also of the offense of participating in a criminal organization. According to Palermo, a criminal organization is a structured group of 3 or more persons existing for a period of time and acting in concert with the aim of committing one or more serious crimes or offenses established in accordance with the convention, in order to obtain directly or indirectly a financial or other material benefit. Once again, we come back to what I said. There is no criminal organization without profit, and in the legally, internationally recognized definition of organized crime, the notion of profit is present. The purpose of the convention was to implement what had been decided by the Naples Declaration, because defining what a criminal organization is good, but you can't achieve anything if you do not develop an international strategy aiming at harmonizing legislation and policies. If you want to cooperate together, you have to have the same definition of what a criminal organization and what an organized crime activity is. You have to develop means to cooperate and to fight against illicit proceeds through the fight against money laundering, and I'll come back to that, through the development of proactive confiscation procedures and mechanisms, and also to develop asset recovery, and eventually to strengthen international cooperation among states, because organized crime is necessarily transnational, and even when it's transnational, it needs the active cooperation among states to defeat it. Why is it necessarily international? You will tell me, oh no, but within a country you can have a criminal organization. Yes, that's true. But they're also, I told you that um, criminal organizations were very opportunistic. And they realized that because of the difficulties in international cooperation, in mutual legal assistance, because of the concept of sovereignty, which makes that you cannot make an investigation in a foreign country without the authorization of this country, they said, okay, but so if we do part of our activities in foreign countries, it will make even more difficult for states to fight against us because they cannot go in the other country. So this is how not only they put their money abroad, because tracing the money abroad becomes extremely difficult, but they could also commit the crimes abroad when they were situated in a country. When I was in a prosecutor general in France, I was the prosecutor general of Alsace, which is the eastern part of France at the border with Germany and with Switzerland. And we had some Albanian criminal organizations which were established just at the tri-border of France, Germany, and Switzerland. They were established in France. They were committing crimes in Germany, and they were putting the money and the assets in Switzerland. So with that, they made the work of law enforcement extremely difficult just by using the international aspect of what they do. So once again, no consistent criminal organization without being international. And this is why there has to be an international response. This is what I wanted to say about this concept of organized crime. And once again, to highlight the fact that the legal and international concept of organized crime is extremely recent compared to the phenomenon itself. And it has proved through the Palermo Convention, which was ratified by 192 states in the world. It's probably with the UN Convention on the Rights of Children, the UN Convention with the highest rates of ratification. And this is interesting. And it is interesting because you cannot have a cooperation agreement with the fight against money laundering, and we come back to profits. It took also a very long time to the international community to realize that fighting against drug trafficking, fighting against smuggling of migrants, smiling against trafficking in arms was extremely complex and difficult. And you could have the frontline soldiers, but you could never go to the top. Because if you take the example of drug trafficking, do you really think that the boss of the drug trafficking organization is involved in drug trafficking himself? Is not at all. You will never see him making a transaction to sell drug to someone else. This is not done by the lieutenants and by the soldiers below. So if you use the traditional mean of the fight against drug trafficking, you will never go back to the top. And this is where we got struck with that. This is where this organization became so powerful, because whereas you could take care of the street dealers, you could never go back to the top. But if you go after money, you know that money will go back to the top, and you know that you will be able to make a link between the money and the drug trafficking bus. And this is where we came at. And there also, I'm talking of something which goes back to the end of the 1980s. So very recently, the history of money laundering is extremely recent as compared to the construction of international law or even of criminal law itself. This is also something very interesting. There has been a case in history which was more older than that, is the Al Capone case. You have probably all heard of Al Capone. During the Prohibition in the United States, Al Capone was a gangster. He was the head of a criminal organization which has become very rich. And Al Capone, the American law enforcement could not get a hold of him because he was personally not involved in anything. So he was not committing crime himself. He was just getting the money. And interestingly, to launder his money, Al Capone was investing in some laundrettes, real laundrettes. So there were shops where you can launder your clothes, and he had a series of laundrettes all over Chicago, which for some explain why we talk about money laundering today. I'm not sure it's true, but it's another story. And the Americans realized that they could not get up after Al Capone like that, and they eventually indicted him not of being the chef of a criminal organization or involving in criminal activities in yes and with prohibition, but because they indicted him of tax fraud, because the revenues which were generated by these criminal activities was not declared to the tax authorities, and he was indicted, arrested, and convicted for tax fraud and not for organized crime and or for money laundering. So once again, very recent development of this concept of money laundering. So what is money laundering? The money laundering process, which is used by criminal organizations, aims at two things. The first is to cut the link between the crime, the criminal, and the profits, so that if you get the money, you cannot link it to the crime and you cannot link it to the criminal. If you get the criminal, you cannot get the money, and you cannot link into the crime. And if you get the and this is how it works, cutting the link, making sure that you cannot approach one and the other. The second objective of money laundering is also to infiltrate the legitimate economy with criminal proceeds and asserting economic power in the heart of the society. So you launder money to make it clean, but not only to make it clean, but to be able to reinvest it in the legitimate economy and become a powerful economic actor in the country. So how do they proceed? I will make it short because I know that time is flying very fast. But there are usually three processes in the money laundering process. The first is to get your cash money, because at the beginning of there is cash money. You don't pay your drugs in credit cards or in checks or in bank transfer. You pay it in cash, and this generates an awful lot of cash money that you have to put somewhere and transform in something else. And this is, I can tell you, the most difficult phase of the laundering process, especially since all the measures have been put in place, the alarm mechanisms in the bank to make sure that when there is too much money coming in a bank account, you can immediately send an alarm and have it sent to the law enforcement authorities. So placing the money into the bank to transform it in something else than the cash money. The second phase of this process will have these profits undergo a series of legal transactions, processes, mostly international, to make it, at the end of the process, appear as completely legitimate. So basically, you will, for example, have a company in Estonia will issue a fake invoice, and you will pay this company, which is yours, of course, and then this money is now in the bank account of a company in Estonia, and which will be reintegrated by another system of fake invoice so that it is repaid in the country where you want to go. This is what is called the layering phase. It's the most complex. It's the most difficult also for law enforcement to assess because it keeps going from one country to the other. And the last part of it is the investment part. So the money is re-injected in the local economy. And here also it's very interesting. Where are these clean proceeds injected? Three types of investment. The first is what I call the money burner investment strategy. When you are a criminal, you want to make use of your money. You want to take advantage of everything. So you will buy yachts, beautiful cars, gold, and etc. This is the way to take advantage of your money. The second is what I call the good family man investment strategy. More often than you think, a criminal organization will make a very prudent investment in areas where the risk of dissipation of the assets is very low. They will, for example, invest in real estate. They will invest in big shareholder companies, which are very renowned, but do not generate necessarily a return on investment. They don't care about return on investment. They just want this money to be clean and to be in solid investment. And the last type of investment that the criminal organization will do through the money laundering process is the Al Capone strategy, is the buying launderettes, is what I call the washing machine type of investment. So you invest your money in businesses that usually generate a lot of cash, so that you can then integrate directly money generated by criminal activities into the legitimate profits of a cash business. Usually they invest in restaurants. In France, we had the famous case in France and Italy of the pizza connection. They were buying pizzerias where people paying cash generally, and they could put the money of drug trafficking as appearing as a legitimate profit. It is casinos, it is tourist resorts, it is all the businesses, including the smallest, like car wash companies that generate a lot of cash, and then you can pretend that the revenues are not those of your criminal activities, but of the proceeds itself. This is about it. I will go very quickly now into the history. I don't have time, a lot of time left. I see that it's already 11:30. So what happened is that when we realized that it was much easier to get after the money and much more successful to get after the money of criminal organization rather than trying to provide evidence of the fact that the big boss committed big criminal activities. There was a need to develop an international strategy because money laundering, like organized crime, are necessarily international. And it was the same challenges that the international community was facing. When you go back to the end of the 80s, you had no definition in any law except in the US, which enacted this money laundering law in 1986. You had no definition of money laundering. So how can you fight against money laundering if it is not defined as a criminal offense in a country? Then you have to ensure prosecution because it is easy to run after the money, but it is not always easy to provide evidence that this money is linked with a given crime and is linked with the given person because precisely of the money laundering process, which aims at cutting this link, as I told you. You had to confiscate the criminal assets, so you had to have processes in place to locate, identify, trace, seize, and confiscate assets. And the legislation in all countries in the world at that time were very poor, I can tell you. I could give you some practical examples of the fact that this legislation on confiscation were not adapted to the fight. It was really, there was a lot to do. We had also to increase the transparency in financial transaction because it was at that time very opaque, and a number of countries made of attracting dirty money a real business. Because there was no obligation to them to declare where the money was from. They were basically closing the eyes when someone was arriving in the bank with two pieces of luggage full of cash, and they made a big business out of that, especially the offshore companies. You had to protect the financial systems which were vulnerable to money laundering. You had to set up mechanisms to exchange financial intelligence because, once again, the intelligence and the information that you have on dirty transaction has to flow and has to fly as quickly as the dirty transaction does itself. And this is also a big challenge because, once again, of the length and the timelines of mutual legal assistance mechanisms. You have to find a way so that when money is invested in foreign countries, the country immediately knows about it. And once again, what was important was to improve international cooperation because at the end of the day, if you transfer very speedily intelligence on the money laundering operation, intelligence is not evidence, and you cannot go to court with just a piece of intelligence. You have to use the mutual legal assistance process to have the evidence collected in a way which is acceptable to courts, and this is where eventually you have to have international cooperation processes which are efficient and which allow to eventually convict traffickers. So once again, on money laundering, I made a long story very short because there would be much more to say about it, but maybe you will have questions about that. Let me end up, as I said, with the European experience about it. Europe is a very strange mechanism. So Europe is not a federation, is not a country, is just a combination of countries which decided to make their relation easier, and in particular to ensure the freedom of circulation, the freedom of commerce, and the freedom of transaction within the European Union. And there also, as you can imagine, when Europe was set up, freedom of circulation and freedom of transaction in a geographical area where the cops and the judges were continued to be limited to the borders of their own individual country within the European Union. It was a fantastic criminal opportunity for them. It was absolutely fantastic. And in particular, after the enlargement in 1966, where for a number of political regions, the European Union, which was at that time only 12 countries, decided to extend to the eastern borders, where you had a number of failed states. I won't name or shame any of them, but some of them were real failed states where criminal organizations were extremely powerful. And these countries became full members of the European Union, and the criminal organization could freely send money all over the place, can freely circulate and then commit crimes in any of the European countries. But when a judge in France wanted to run after a criminal in Romania or in Bulgaria or what have you, it was extremely difficult because you had to write a beautiful rogatory letter, which was going nowhere, and the person in his own country was completely immune of any type of prosecution. And this could not continue like that. It further developed the power of these Eastern Europe criminal organizations, and Europe had to do something. And at the end of the 90s, we are still at the same period. It's very interesting. And once again, I had the chance to live all this because I was in this international organization at that time. It is in 1999 that the European Union said, now we have to do something. We have to be serious about that. What are we going to do? And they basically did four things. The first was to decide that all judicial decision taken in a country will be recognized mutually by any of the other European countries. And I can tell you it was not easy because the standards, the judicial standards, were not the same from one country to another. There is Europe is a patchwork of different judicial systems. It's a patchwork of different practices sometimes, but it was the key to everything. If you don't recognize a confiscation order made in another country, how can you implement it in your country? So mutual recognition of judicial decision. The second was, because I say it chronologically, was the European arrest warrant. We set up a system by which any judge or any prosecutor in any part of Europe can issue an arrest warrant, which is immediately executable in any country in Europe without going through any kind of mutual legal assistance process. The country where the person is arrested receives the arrest warrant, and he executes it basically more or less as if it was a national arrest warrant, and they have 10 days to surrender the person to the requesting country. So this is a very efficient system. It was not easy to put in place because some European countries were very reluctant, but it works. It works very well now, and it is admitted then as a very powerful tool. The third one, and which is more recent, goes back to I don't want to make any mistake, but it can be 2019, is the European Investigative Order. And we have applied here the same concept as for the European arrest warrant. Any prosecutor, any judge of any European countries can issue any type of investigative order, which has to be executed with no power to refuse or to do it the way they want. They have to execute it as soon as it is issued by the judge or the prosecutor of the requesting country. It can be confiscated. It can be a seizing order. It can be a hearing witness. It can be anything, and it has to be executed. The difficulty, and they realized it very early in the process, even before putting in place the European investigative order, is that it's good to issue an investigative order, but you have to make sure that it arrives to the right person, because it doesn't go anymore through ministers of justice or through the ministries of foreign affairs. It goes straight to the person to whom you want to request the investigation. But it's very difficult because I don't know who is the person in charge in Poland or in Estonia. And this is why very early, the European Union established an extremely powerful, while completely informal mechanism, which is Eurojust. Eurojust has no power in itself. Eurojust is the European Union Judicial Cooperation Agency, which makes this cooperation among European countries easier. It has no power. It cannot investigate. It cannot issue arrest warrants. It cannot convict person or whatever. It just facilitates, and it has changed the life of judges and prosecutors all over the Europe. How? I am a judge in France. I want to. I have, for example, a pedopornography case where we have identified offenders in Poland, Austria, Italy, Germany, and etc. You are not going to send an AIO, an investigative order, to all of these countries. What you do is to ask for a meeting at Eurojust. Eurojust, and I should begin by that, is composed of one member, one judge or one prosecutor of each of the European countries, which is the representative of these countries. They work as a college, and you can I can say to my representative in Eurojust, I want to organize a meeting with Germany, Poland, Italy, and what have you. The day after, when I say the day after, it can even be done the same day. These colleagues meet together. They decide to execute the European investigative order in all the countries together at the same day and the same time, so that it can be there is no risk of flight or leak or anything. And the day after, the decision is executed all over Europe. You can do it bilaterally also when you have a difficulty with countries because it has not executed your order in due time. You organize a meeting at Eurojust. You talk to the representative of the person. You as a judge or a prosecutor, you can go to Eurojust with your national member, and you can ask the judge in the other country to join to the meeting. It solves basically everything. It's a fantastic tool. All judges and prosecutors are in Europe. Once again, it has made their life much easier, and they recognize it as something which has made the difference, in particular when it comes to organized crime. I think I should end there. I had so much more to tell you, but I hope we will have other opportunities to do it. So as to give you some time for question. So I will give the floor to you, asking you to speak loud and slowly because I'm not sure the sound is always perfect. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to tell you about all of this mechanism.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? I'll just check before speaking further. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Firstly, just thank you very much for such a thought-provoking and eloquent lecture. Definitely a worthy start to the series. I wanted to ask you first, before we look into further questions from the audience, whether you could tell us a little bit about the European experience of confronting the link between organized crime and human trafficking and connected notions of maybe labor migration as well.
Yes, it is a very complex situation. Human trafficking, especially trafficking in migrants in Europe, is a huge phenomenon. As you know, you have all heard about it. It's not only smuggling in migrants; it's also sexual slavery. It is also slavery in itself, because you have people who are employed without salary by mafias sometimes, without being paid and everything, with the promise of regularizing their situation, their visa situation. So it's a huge problem in Europe. The difficulty that we are facing is that when it comes to addressing the problem within Europe, it works with all the difficulties of the evidence and identifying the big chiefs and etc. The difficulties here is that in most cases, the criminal organizations behind them are not in Europe, and they are sometimes in states which are not really cooperative for a number of reasons. Because they are not equipped with the possibility to investigate, and or because they are in such an unrest that they cannot give priority to that, or sometimes because it's part of their economy to have this criminal organization prosperous. So the key issue we hear with trafficking migrants is the fact that we are not dealing with European criminal organization, but foreign ones.
Thank you. With that, we'd like to open the floor to the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand or put the question in the chat box as you prefer. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the very informative talk, sir. Very simple language. We understood a lot about money laundering. Now, my one question to you, sir, is that with the advent of the cryptocurrency, is it possible to find out the money laundering nowadays? Because the cryptocurrency is now holding the field. Is it possible to trace out the money laundering as it was before? And the second part of my question also, as you said, the organized crime and money laundering, do they affect the political stability of a country, especially in European countries and Latin American countries? Thank you, sir.
For the first question, curiously, whereas cryptocurrencies are seen as being in the dark net, as being completely impossible to track. In fact, there is a traceability system of cryptocurrencies. By chance, not all criminal organizations know about it. The difficulty for law enforcement with cryptocurrencies is that they get very quickly from one place to another, and therefore it's very difficult to track the thing. But a posteriori, you have the possibility to crack the operation and see exactly in which wallet it went. I'm not a specialist of cryptocurrencies, but specialists could tell you that actually the crypto market is not as opaque as it could think. It's just that it's a very fast system, and that sometimes makes the life difficult of law enforcement. But I didn't get exactly your second question. Could you repeat?
That is whether the organized crime and money laundering, do they play a very active part in the political effect or political stability of a country?
What do you mean in practice?
That is the organized crime taking place and money laundering going together. Will it affect the political stability of a country?
It does. Yes. It does. Of course. In many cases, the weaker the country is, the more destabilizing it can be, and even for big economies. I could give you the example of Switzerland. All of the realization by the international community that this organized crime could destabilize a country didn't come from Colombia or anything, because the Western world did not care too much about the situation in Colombia, let's be clear. But it was Switzerland, because at the end of the 80s, there was a big scandal in Switzerland, because the husband of the Minister of Justice, who was a banker, was corrupted by the Cali or the Medellin cartel. I think it was the Medellin cartels, and he was arrested for participation in money laundering scheme with the Medellin cartel. And I can tell you that Switzerland, which is the most stable democracy in the world, with the most stable financial system, it was completely shaken and shocked by this scandal. And there was the realization that if the Medellin cartel could destabilize Switzerland, there was something to do about it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Please go ahead, sir.
Sir, with the deep gratitude to your immense knowledge in the field, I would like to put you some question regarding the digital technologies which are leveraged by the organizations in effectuating the money laundering, and how could the judiciary would be able to cope with challenges? Would you please share some thoughts
about the new technologies and how to deal with the new technology for judicial? Is it your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. You know, the new technologies are a challenge to law enforcement, but it is also a tool. Let's not forget, for example, that artificial intelligence will open a lot of opportunities for crime, but it also opens huge opportunities for law enforcement. for judges, for prosecutors, in the investigations themselves, and etc. So yes, it creates a challenge, but yes, also it also provides new practical solution for law enforcement in the crime. Social networks, for example, social networks are widely used by the organized crime, but it's also a fantastic way to provide evidence of something. Let me give you an example. In Europe, a couple of years ago, in Belgium and France, the investigators realized that a telecommunication system called Sky ECC was set up by criminals so that they could exchange in encrypted telecommunication system, so that no one could hack them, and they could freely communicate one with the other. This is a huge challenge. When there's a closed telecommunication system, you can imagine how much traffic you can do through this telecommunication system. As a matter of fact, some investigators succeeded in cracking the encryption of these cell phone system, because it was cell phones, and you could buy. I think that for 8,000 euros, you had the 1 year subscription with this criminal telephone network, and you would get a special cell phone completely encrypted. But the police in Belgium and in France succeeded in cracking the encryption system of this cell phone telecommunication system, and in 1 year they were able to accumulate an incredible number of evidence. They took their time to establish the link with one operator and the other. They downloaded all the pictures, because they were sometimes sending pictures of a person who had been murdered or tortured because he was in an opposite criminal organizations. They had all the information about the shipment of drugs from one place to another. At some point, they decided to stop listening to the conversation, because they were facing a very big ethical problem, which was that they were listening to crimes being committed without doing nothing, because he was helping them knowing more about the intricacies and the links of all the organization. But at some point, you cannot continue to let a crime being committed in front of you just because it will help you evidence another crime. So they decided to stop, and they arrested, I think, all over Europe, more than 1,000 persons in just one day. And they seized like 500 or 600 tons of cocaine in Europe, thanks to that. And the investigation continues, because they accumulated so much intelligence and so much evidence that they could not use it all over the place. And today, all police forces in Europe continue to take advantage of this evidence to build cases and bring people to justice. So this is what you say. Yes, new technologies like encrypted systems are a challenge for law enforcement, but they can be also a huge opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your deep insights.
I see we already have our next question. Yes, please.
Shall I?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor, for that insightful lecture. So when I was going through the Palermo Convention, I particularly came across two provisions, particularly two central provisions, that is Article 5 and 6, which specifically uses the term intentionally. So these organized crimes as well as the offenses like money laundering are considered to be offenses that affect the social and economic fabric of a nation. And the general approach that we follow in India and many other jurisdictions follow with respect to socio-economic offenses is the disregarding the requirement of the mental element. So my question is the approach that has been taken in the Palermo Convention with respect to the inclusion of the word intentionally. First of all, does intentionally in the convention require a specific intent to cause harm, or is it a general intent to perform that prohibited act? And will that be sufficient under the convention? And how does this requirement of intentionality address the complexity in cross-border criminal activities, particularly when it comes to varying interpretations of the term intent or intention in different jurisdictions?
Thank you for a question. You are at the core of the issue and the challenges for prosecutors with the intentional elements of that crime, because it is extremely difficult to provide evidence of the intention, because this intention is threefold or more. You have to prove that the person who was laundering money knew about the illegal origin of the funds. Yes, you have to prove that he laundered the money intentionally, etc., etc. I don't have the full list of all the intentional elements that you have to prove for this, and this at the beginning at least was making the life of prosecutors extremely difficult. And I'm very interested by what you say about the fact that you are disregarding the mental element in India, and I would be very interested in knowing more about it, because the Siracusa Institute has recently issued a research about the way states have dealt with this intentional element one way or another. There was very innovative solution found in countries to alleviate the burden of proof of the intention, or sometimes of the illicit origin of the assets of the criminal process, because it was making the life extremely difficult. For example, if someone was laundering money, the prosecutors not only had to prove that it was coming from a crime, but that it was coming from a specific crime. Was it drug trafficking, trafficking in arms, and etc., and to prove that the person who was laundering money knew about this specific origin of the money, which was sometimes purely impossible to demonstrate. And many countries have put in place a number of solutions. For example, let me give you one example which I know well because it's from my country. There is a provision in the money laundering law which says that when a financial transaction is so complex and so difficult to so complex and without any economic justification, you don't need to make a complex transaction to buy a car somewhere. When they are so complex that they cannot have any other justification than laundering money, then they are presumed to come from criminal activities, and it is then up to the person, the offender, to provide evidence that it is not coming from a criminal. So that's a French example. I could give you a myriad of different examples, but in our research, we did not have the Indian example. So I think it's important, maybe through Kirian, that we stay in touch so that we can include in a further edition of this research something about the intentional element in India and the legislation on money laundering in India.
Thank you. Sorry, we are coming towards the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you, is it okay if we ask a couple more concluding questions?
Yes, on my side, no problem. No problem. I'm here to be with you, and I will be happy to continue with you.
We appreciate it very much. So there's the first question in the chat box. It says, can you please share your views regarding how the offer of digital citizenship by different nation states could complicate the network of money laundering further?
The offer of digital, what did you say?
Digital citizenship. Digital citizenship.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not digital. I would say it's more virtual citizenship. That's also a key issue. And the Financial Action Task Force Against Money Laundering has recently issued a research on the issue of what we call economic citizenship or visa exemption and things like that. I told you a moment ago that a number of rogue states made a business of laundering money from other countries. And one of the tools that they were offering to those were laundering money in their countries to attract this criminal investment was to offer a virtual citizenship to these persons. You have dozens of examples, especially in some Caribbean offshore centers, in which you would be offered a passport, a real passport, not a virtual one of the country, if you invested more than 250,000 euros or dollars in the country. Sometimes you could simply buy the passport to become a citizen of this country. Of course, becoming a citizen of Dominica, which is sometimes which may not have necessarily a direct interest for you, but in terms when there is a request for extradition, for example, and you are a national of that country, many countries do not accept to extradite their nationals. So having several nationalities allows you to be protected by the sovereignty of the country or by the citizenship of the country. And sometimes it was even worse because I told you about the freedom of circulation, freedom of transaction in Europe. You had some European countries which were selling economic citizenship. It was even the case of United Kingdom, for example. The United Kingdom, for an investment of more than £1 million, would give you the citizenship of the country. And why is it that you have so many former Russian head of criminal organizations who are living in the UK? It's because they bought the citizenship of this country. Other countries like Malta and Cyprus did it also. And I would say that half of the organized crime in Russia have a passport from Cyprus, so are able to travel within Europe without any kind of visa because they have the citizenship of this country. These economic citizenship systems have been discontinued in Europe, but they continue to exist in another of countries, and it is a real problem. Yes.
Thank you. The next question in the chat box deals with the threshold or the rigor to obtain bail in money laundering cases. So the question elaborates that it's quite hard. There's a very high standard in India to obtain bail in cases of money laundering, and asks if you could give some examples how it is in the European system, the bail conditions when dealing with money laundering cases.
The bail system is very much a common law system, and we have very few common law system in Europe. So the bail system is not an issue there. It's the case in the UK, in Ireland, and that's it, I think. So it is not a real issue. We have the possibility of even in continental law countries to have a person freed under the payment of a what we call a deposit, but it's not exactly the bailing system. So it would be very difficult for me to tell you much about this example.
Thank you. There are two more questions before I'll hand over to the director to deliver the closing remarks. The first one says, what challenges will the conversion of proceeds of crime into cryptocurrency bring to the conventional way of dealing with money laundering?
There is no challenge to convert currency into cryptocurrency, because you have a number of platforms who offer you to in lieu of euros or dollars to transform it into cryptocurrencies. So this is not in itself a challenge. The challenge is that for the criminal organizations, they cannot buy cryptocurrency with cash. There is no. I've heard of a couple of them which offer the possibility of cash payment, but within Europe, this has been regulated now and is not possible anymore. So buying cryptocurrency is not a challenge to anyone. It could be a challenge when you want to convert again your cryptocurrency into a deposit on a bank account, because then it could trigger the attention of law enforcement, because you know that there is the duty for banks to report suspicious transaction, and therefore if you suddenly have 2 million euros arriving on your bank account because of a sale of cryptocurrencies, they would have to report to the financial intelligence unit. So the problem is not there. The problem is to transform cash into other form of virtual assets, including a bank account, for example.
Thank you. And the last question from the chat box says, is there any agency working internationally to monitor the money laundering activities and illegal investments of this money to other nations? So with a transnational framework, for example.
Yes. So there is no supranational agency which would have powers to investigate or to undertake coercive action or to get information from bank at international level. But there is one institution which is the Egmont Group, which is the association of all financial intelligence units in the world. And as I just told you, when there is a suspicious transaction it has to be immediately reported to the financial intelligence unit. And if this is in relation to a foreign transaction, the FIU will send it to the correspondent FIU in the other country through the Egmont group, so that the financial intelligence can circulate very easily. It is a very practical and efficient system without any particular supranational powers for the Egmont group. But this allows the Egmont group to monitor the situation in terms of where suspicious money goes from and goes where. And you can request the FIU, the Financial Intelligence Unit of your country, through the FIU in another country, any type of banking information that would allow you to do your job. Yes, this is a very simple system, but it works very efficiently.
Good evening. It's so remarkable speech, and you are kind enough to take questions from the participants who have gathered even virtually, and see that the speech itself broadened our perspective regarding the money laundering from the basics to the great nuances. You have traveled, you have taken us to that kind of difficult complexities of money laundering issue, and how profit is driven in organized crime. These things and the nitty-gritties of these things were explained to you so well. We are so grateful to you. A grand, remarkable opening to our Kerala Justice Dialogue series. And we are fortunate to get you as a keynote speaker of this session on behalf of the Academy and on behalf of all persons who gathered virtually in this platform. I express our deepest gratitude to you, and you had done a remarkable job for our benefit. Thank you, sir. And Father Kiran Mohandas Menon is a senior officer of Nuremberg Academy. He also associated with us to make it possible. With all respect, on behalf of all persons and on behalf of the Academy, I express our deepest gratitude to Kiran Mohandas Menon. Also, the participants, you were committed throughout the sessions. You did ask some nice questions to the keynote speaker. Thank you all for turning up virtually to this session. And a perfect note, we have begun the Kerala Justice Dialogue series. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to be with you today. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope you did too.
We can associate further in future also. We can look forward, sir.
Yes, you have a standing invitation to visit the Siracusa Institute. We have to keep in touch and to make sure that both our academies and institutes can work together in the future. It's the core mission of the Siracusa Institute. The judge and prosecutor training has always been a big part of my professional life. So I would be delighted to continue with you.
You are kind enough to extend such an invitation. We will look at that. We will look forward to have more associations, sir. Thank you. Thank you once again, you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Let's terminate the proceedings.
Bye.